Starting us off this countdown, we have Harold Dahl. This is supposedly the real-life story that inspired the movie Men in Black. So on June 27th, 1947, Harold Dahl, his young son, and his dog went out on a conservation mission. While out on the fishing boat, they saw 6 donut-shaped aircrafts hovering in the air above them. The crafts then started dropping weird molten-type waste onto the lake. He described it as if it was raining lava or white metal. This ended up hitting his son's arm and the dog. The son was badly injured and sadly the dog didn't survive. When this happened, Harold managed to take a picture of the aircraft. The following morning, he was visited by a man in a black suit at a local diner. The man apparently threatened Harold to delete the photo, and he was told to not talk about the incident. But this story has been retold so many times that the facts are now jumbled. Some say that it was his son that got his arm burnt on the alien lava, but in another story, it was his co-workers, so I don't even know what to think.
Coming at number 9, we have the cornfield. It should be no surprise that we are doing a list about Men in Black, and we got a point about a cornfield. Aliens love cornfields for whatever reason. Maybe they land in a cornfield, they scoop up a bunch of corn, then they make popcorn, and that they can eat while they watch humans freak out because they landed in a cornfield. That seems like the perfect circle of entertainment. But this point was thrown on top of Reddit by Redditor Muffins for Petey. They said that they grew up on a farm and one night they saw something fly down from the sky and hover right above their farm. It was shaped like a rectangle and looked like it was glowing light, like a massive glowing log in the sky. Well, then this thing just vanished. Almost as fast as it came, it was gone. They must have only needed a little bit of popcorn. The next day there was a knock at the door. It was 2 men in black suits and they had dark glasses on. They said that they needed to inspect the farm because there was a supposed gas leak. It was very strange because mostly everything on the farm was run by solar energy. These 2 men had government identification but gave them very little information as to what they were going to do. They just told them that they needed to stay in their home or they were going to be arrested for endangering people. So they listened, and then these 2 dudes poked around for a little bit and then they were off. They never said if they found anything or fixed a gas leak. The whole thing was just very suspicious. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out.
In our 8th spot, we have Shane Sover. This next encounter happened fairly recently. So on October 14th, 2008, hotel manager Shane Sover had been informed by a security guard at his hotel that he had seen a UFO from the hotel. 2 weeks later, hotel staff were panicked when 2 strange men entered the hotel in search of Shane and the security guard. Shane, wanting to see who these men were, checked the security footage. And sure enough, 2 men in black suits wearing a hat could be seen wandering the hotel. The men didn't have any hair and looked fairly strange. Yeah, I'm thinking they were like aliens disguised as humans.
Coming in number 7, we have the footage. If you ever get some hardcore evidence that aliens are real, you better put that stuff on a hard drive and beeline it to the border, because there is no way that you're going to upload that stuff without having Men in Black come down on you. I grabbed this story off an Alien Encounter subreddit, and the person writing it said they for real saw a UFO fly above them and then zoom off like a laser, and they managed to get it on video. The first thing they went to do was upload it to the internet, but all of the sudden they had no signal. This was in the middle of the night and they were all alone. And then out of nowhere, 2 men in black were standing right behind him. They had their faces covered and guns pointed at him. They demanded the phone, and as soon as he gave it to them, he passed out. He woke up in the drunk tank and was apparently being belligerent, but he hadn't drank anything that night and his phone was still missing.
And at number 6, we have the spaceman photo. In 1964, Jim Templeton spent the day taking photos of his wife and daughter in a field. But when he got the photos developed, he saw something quite strange in the background of his daughter's photo. It appeared to be a spaceman right by her daughter. The only other people that had been there that day were some older ladies. Of course, people didn't believe the photo to be real, but an analyst at Kodak confirmed that the photo was real and hadn't been tampered with. Even creepier, after Jim's story made big news, he was visited by 2 government agents, 2 men in suits that referred to themselves as number 9 and 10. They then demanded to see where the photo was taken, and he was heavily questioned about that day. When Jim told them he never saw the figure in person, the men became angry and drove away. is pretty sus.
Coming in at number 5, we have Albert K. Bender. It turns out dedicating your life to flying saucers is nothing new. Albert K. Bender was the founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau. This place was leading the field in investigative work when it came to finding out what the government knew about aliens. In 1955, he wrote a paper that was detailing everything the government was doing with aliens, and it was ready to be published in the Space Review. But that would change when he was visited by some men in black. They teleported into his room late one night and had the psychic ability to talk to him through their minds. They manipulated him to destroy his research, and that was that. He would never go on to touch anything to do with aliens after this point.
Moving on to number 4, we have Jack and Mary Robinson. Back in 1968, Jack and his wife Mary were both UFO researchers. Didn't even know that was a job, but where can I apply? But the more they researched into aliens and UFOs, the more weird stuff began to happen. One time they returned home to find that their house had been searched. All their files regarding UFOs and aliens had been tampered with. Then things started to get worse. Mary started noticing a man that would stand outside their apartment and watch them. The man was always wearing a black suit and a hat. In fact, they managed to capture a photo of him. Mary had told her friend what was happening, and the friend drove over and saw the man for herself and took a photo of him. It's so freaky.
Coming in number 3, we have the Night Visitors. I'm on the fence when it comes to meeting aliens. Like, of course I would want to meet aliens, but it would have to be the right setting. Like in a park or at a party or a big reveal event like they do with the latest iPhone. Steve Cook is like, now I give you the alien. But the way this next story goes wouldn't be my ideal circumstance. Reddit user Chop Stew told a story of an alien encounter that brought a man in black into his life. It all happened super fast. He woke up in the middle of the night and there were 5 tall gray beings standing around his bed. He was in a haze, then he started to panic, but before he could even speak, he was back asleep. He woke up the next morning feeling a little bit rattled. Whatever he saw last night seemed so real, but it couldn't have been. It must have been a strange dream. The next day at work, he was called into HR, but there was a new person working. This lady had just come in for the day from head office. She wanted to just talk about his personal life. They chatted for a bit and then she asked him about his dreams. He could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up when she posed the question. He didn't give in and kept the alien sighting to himself. The next day, the regular HR person was back and he never found out who this replacement was and why they wanted to speak to him and how they knew about what had just happened to him the night before. So this time, it was a lady in black.
In our second spot, we have Dr. Herbert Hopkins. Back in the day, a man named Dr. Hopkins was working as a consultant on a UFO case in Maine. Again, I didn't know that was a job. That was until one day he received a phone call from someone claiming to be part of the UFO community. Again, didn't know that was a thing. He asked if he could visit Dr. Hopkins to discuss the case. Hopkins agreed and he was greeted by an intimidating man wearing a black suit and black tie. Apparently, this guy was extremely pale with no hair or eyebrows. As soon as the man entered Hopkins' home, his dog went berserk, just started barking at him. The man then basically interrogated Hopkins to see how much he knew. Before leaving though, he told Hopkins that there were 2 coins in his pocket, Hopkins' pocket. He then told him to reach into one of his pockets and retrieve it. He did it and then he said to hold the coin in his hand and look at it closely. Within a few seconds, the coin started to go in and out of focus before disappearing completely from his hand. He then said that the coin would never be seen on this plane again. It gets weirder. The man then asked him if he was familiar with a man named Barney Hill. Barney Hill was a man that said he was abducted by a UFO. He died from cerebral hemorrhage. When Hopkins said yes, he knew of him, the man said, Barney didn't have a heart, just like you no longer have a coin. Basically implying that he's got the power to kill him. And honestly, he probably killed Barney. Hopkins was then told to get rid of every file he had on the UFO case. And he did as he was told. He burned every shred of evidence. Watch, now the men in black are gonna come after me and Shay for this video. Just saying.
Again, coming to the number 1 spot, we have a message from the future. Now, who knows if this is true? It's fun to believe stories like the one I'm about to tell you because it makes life a little bit more interesting. But a story I snagged online spoke of someone who started to receive messages on their phone. They were from an unknown number, but they had details about things that seemed to be random. The messages would be like, a man in a plaid shirt will buy a coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars next to you and forget his wallet. Like, okay, but what does that mean? But then these events started happening. It was like these texts were coming from from the future. So he started to respond to them, but the person would never communicate outside of these messages that were hints from the future. But why was this coming to our random writer? Well, we never found out, because one day a black van pulled up next to him and 4 men in black suits jumped out and told him that he was under arrest. They put him in the van and then took him to a police station. They searched him, took his phone, he was detained for a few hours and then released, and was given everything except for his phone. They said it got lost and they would send it to him when they found it, but he never got his phone back, and from there the messages just stopped.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have a Mexico circus demon. This demon story takes place in Mexico in 1942 and is a son recounting his father's story from when he was 20 years old. The father and his younger brother went to check out the circus that had just arrived in town. They were most excited to see the freak shows, but after checking them out for a while, there wasn't really anything that was piquing their interest. They met a couple girls and they were about to go check out some music when a man wearing a dinner jacket came up and started talking to them. He said he was the greatest illusionist in the world and that he could show them a trick both scary and amazing. He also said that he wasn't actually part of the circus and that he had auditioned, but they said his act was so frightening they couldn't allow him in the circus. The father and his brother were both very intrigued now and asked to see the trick, and the man said he could only show them if they came to his trailer, which wasn't too far away. In 2021, we know that you never go to a stranger's trailer, but they all followed the man in this story. Once at the trailer, the man begins his trick. He holds up his right hand and then puts a white glove on it. He then waves his left hand around his right, wiggling his right fingers and chanting some words that the guys didn't understand. He then asks if they're ready. The guys reply yes, and the man pulls the white glove off of his hand, revealing his hand as only a skeleton. The man even went as far as to grab the father's head with his skeleton hand to prove it was real. The boys of course got out of there as quickly as possible. In our number 9 spot today, we have the demon on the veranda story. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. This story takes place in a small village in India when the storyteller was 16 years old and living in a boarding school. All the girls slept in a big hall, and one night one of the other girls, named Malty, woke her up around 1 a.m. as Malty wasn't feeling too well. She goes to get some water and went outside on the veranda with Malty to try and help her feel better as she was feeling very nauseous. She looked to the right and saw the far end of the veranda, and there was only one light, and the rest of the light was all coming from the moon. After a while of comforting Malty, she looked up to the right again and saw a kind of cat-like figure, but after a closer look, this cat had the head of a human and was bald with big eyes. She tried to convince herself that her eyes were deceiving her, but it began getting closer and she could see it more clearly. She was frozen with fear, and by the time this creature was around 10 meters away from her, it let out a meow sound that absolutely terrified her. She screamed, grabbed Malty, and got both of them back into the hall where everyone was still sleeping. This of course woke everyone up though, and the warden came over to see what all the commotion was about. She asked the warden not to make any loud sounds and begged her not to open the door. Everyone in the hallway looked outside and saw this shadowy creature moving before it just disappeared. To this day, she still isn't exactly sure what she saw, but she's glad she has never encountered it again. In our number 8 spot today, we have this sleep paralysis demon. This story comes from the Reddit user JStation666, and this is what they had to say about their demon encounter. I was laying in bed and fell asleep, and I woke up not being able to move or scream. I tried my best and it went on for about 5 minutes. It stopped, but after that I felt hands around my throat trying to choke me. I look up and all I see is a very tall black outline of a figure with flaming hair, and I could feel its long finger-like claws around my neck. The next morning I get up and there's red marks around my neck of what looks like very large hands. Sadly, I didn't take a picture when I should have, but after, it's hard for me to get to sleep in a dark room. I feel like I would have thought this was just a scary case of sleep paralysis, but the waking up with hand marks around their throat truly is very scary and kind of unexplainable. I am glad that they made it through this frightening situation. In our number 7 spot today, we have this eye-changing demon. This story comes from the Reddit user Katzabar from a time when they were around 11 or 12 years old. He starts off with explaining that they moved apartments a lot growing up, and no matter where they went, entities would always find him, and he also tells us that he had bright blue eyes, like his mother's, which will be important later. They moved into a new apartment and things immediately began to go poorly. He had a dream where he was in a bright white room and there was a beast on the ceiling that looked into his eyes and roared. The roar obviously frightened him and he woke up screaming, which of course woke up his mother, who rushed to his side. His mother was also very frightened, not only because she woke up to the sound of her son screaming, but because his scream did not sound like a little boy's, but was like the scream of a grown man. If this whole situation wasn't already strange enough, after this dream, his eyes turned from that bright blue color to a hazel color and have never changed back to blue. If that really is true, I have no idea how that happened, and that is honestly pretty crazy. In our number 6 spot today, we have this gray skin demon. This story comes from Pink Magic 724 on Reddit and is about a night they had a few years ago while still in college. Pink Magic's best friend of many years was in town, so they went out for a dinner to catch up and spend some time together. They, of course, end up getting a bit caught up, as best friends do, and before they know it, it is around 2 a.m. and definitely time for them to head home. Pink Magic's friend was the one who drove, so they headed off to Pink Magic's house. They're at an intersection waiting for the light to turn green when Pink Magic turns their head and looks out the window into the car next to them. This is when she sees the person next to them is looking directly at them, but they have gray skin, completely black eyes with no white, and they are smiling, but their teeth are long and sharp. Whoever or whatever this thing is, it will not break eye contact. Pink Magic tries to scream, but no sound will come out, and eventually the friend sees the creature too and immediately speeds out of there. To this day, neither of them like to talk about it, and neither of them are quite sure what exactly they witnessed. In our number 5 spot today, we have this demon in your mind. This story comes from Sylvie on Reddit and starts off a few years ago after an argument with a friend. This friend was really upset, so Sylvie went to bed, definitely not feeling great about what had just happened, and Sylvie's behavior that led to this argument. About halfway through the night, Sylvie thinks that they had a dream, but they can't for sure say because they remember it so clearly. Sylvie woke up and had a knife in their hand, and the room was illuminated by the moonlight. As they looked around the room, they saw on the wall some words that looked like they were written in blood. Sylvie looked around the room again when something caught her eye. There was some sort of creature in the dark corner of the room that looked like one of those deep sea fish with the scary eyes and the really sharp teeth. I think they're called anglerfish. As soon as Sylvie saw this creature, the moonlight in the room changed to a flashing orange light, and this is when Sylvie definitely woke up in a cold sweat. Sylvie chalked it up to just a really scary dream and went and got ready for school and went about their day, but they just could not shake this feeling. After the first period was over, Sylvie was feeling really anxious and they reached up to the cross necklace they were wearing when a voice spoke in their head. The voice said, "God won't save you." Sylvie said that they had a few more incidents with this demon, but after firmly telling it to leave and using their religion and faith as a guide and a protection, they have luckily been demon-free ever since. In our number 4 spot today, we have the demon in the basement. This story comes from the Reddit user DreamGuy72 and starts off in his first apartment in the summer of 1992 in Casper, Wyoming, on none other than Elm Street. The apartment was a basement suite where Dreamguy and his boyfriend lived, and their friends occupied the main floor suite above them. One day, Dreamguy was home alone and was repainting the main bedroom when he decided to take a break. After he had a drink, he headed back into the main bedroom, but this is when all of his hairs stood up. He saw that there was something painted on the opposite wall from the one that he had been painting. His heart was absolutely pounding as he walked up to the writing, and this is where he saw that the paint was still wet and dripping down the wall. The paintbrush he had been using was exactly where he left it, and there wasn't any paint on the floor. The words just said, I am here. He of course got out of there as quickly as possible, and when he told his boyfriend later, he just kind of dismissed it. A few months go by and Dream Guy and his boyfriend get home after a long day of both of them being out of the house all day. Dream Guy heads to the shower to get ready for bed, and as he's in the shower, he hears the bathroom door open and close. He of course just assumes it's his boyfriend, and he's rinsing the conditioner out of his hair when he asks his boyfriend if he is joining him in the shower, and that's when he hears the response, "Sounds good to me," but it is not his boyfriend's voice. He then feels ice-cold hands grab his shoulders and spin him around as he opens his eyes to see that no one else is there. He of course bolts it out of the bathroom, and he's now in the front room trying to catch his breath when he sees his boyfriend shaking, pointing to the bathroom, saying he saw it go in there. It's safe to say that Dream Guy didn't live there for much longer, and I am very glad he made it out of this apartment and lived to tell the tale. In our number 3 spot today, we have this lady ghost demon story. This story comes from the Reddit user 7-Legged Spider, and they really just dive in. Basically, for several years, Spider saw what they thought was just a lady ghost every night at the door of the closet. It happened for so long that Spider just got used to it and even started saying goodnight to her. Spider says she didn't look bad or rotten, she was just a lady with pale skin and dark hair. Anyway, after a few years of this, Spider finally tells a friend at school about the lady. This friend, of course, didn't believe the story right away, but the next day at school, he tells Spider that this lady tried to hurt him while he was sleeping. Now, Spider didn't believe the friend and thought he was just playing a prank. Some more time goes by and Spider decides to tell another friend about the lady, and the same thing happens where the next day she comes and tells Spider that the lady had tried to hurt her while she was sleeping. The first friend and the second friend didn't even know each other, so it's not like they could have been conspiring, which made Spider believe his first friend was telling the truth. Then, a while after that, Spider is on a video chat with a friend and they are talking about the paranormal when they both see something run across the screen. They chalk it up to just being a computer glitch, and Spider starts telling his friend about the lady, and then Spider begins to get extremely dizzy, like they're going to pass out. After it goes away, Spider tells their friend that they're okay, and the friend replies that they were out of it for at least a full minute, and that he could feel that someone was there trying to hurt Spider. I'm really glad that Spider and all the friends ended up being okay, and I really hope that they found a way to get rid of this lady demon. In our number 2 spot today, we have Zozo. This story comes from Reddit user Archaic Alchemy, who we'll call A. When A was 22, they were staying with their sister, and one night they had a couple of good friends over to hang out, and they decided to play around with a Ouija board, which is always the start of a good demon story. A had read about people encountering an entity called Zozo, and A really wanted some proof that things exist beyond our physical realm, so they wanted to use the Ouija board. Everyone places their hands on the planchette, and A calls out to Zozo. It took a few attempts before anything happened, but then the planchette began to move in figure eights. No matter what was asked, it just kept moving in figure eights until it finally spelled out M-A-M-A. That's us, we're MA. Maybe they were talking about our channel. A kept asking who they were talking to, and eventually they spelled out Zozo, and then things really escalated. The planchette was taken to the letters to spell out kill you, and when A asked who, Zozo spelled out one of the friends' names. They didn't take it seriously and kept asking more questions, and one friend made the mistake of insulting Zozo. The planchette begins frantically moving through the alphabet backwards over and over before it just stops. Then the energy in the room completely drops, and A knows that this means Zozo has manifested itself. Suddenly, A begins to laugh maniacally with no control over it. A could feel Zozo's presence inside and could feel Zozo turning all of this hatred and anger towards the friend that had been named before. A's emotions suddenly completely switch and they begin crying uncontrollably before again suddenly snapping back to anger. A's head turns involuntarily to look at the friend with a menacing grin as A pushes the planchette towards the friend. The friend decides it's rightfully time to leave, and shortly after they left, A felt like they regained control and Zozo's presence had disappeared. I'm so glad that nothing even crazier happened and that Zozo wasn't able to harm this friend. In our number 1 spot today, we have Velgrod. This story comes from the Reddit user Wheezy Donkey. Since he was a child, he's had interactions with a demon he knows as Velgrod. He first noticed the demon during the night as he was trying to fall asleep. It would continue saying his name quietly over and over again. This happened about once a month on a random night as he was trying to fall asleep, and he tried to ignore it, but every time it happened, the voice was a little louder because it was getting closer. One Friday night, he heard the voice and realized it was right at the end of his bed. He was frozen in fear, and every other night, if he waited long enough, the demon would just leave, but this time it wasn't happening. He found a lot of courage and lifted the blanket to inspect what he hoped was just his overactive imagination, but what he saw was too real for him to believe it was just imagination. This creature was tall and lanky with the yellow eyes of a reptile. His eyes were also bulging and very far apart. The creature apparently appeared as though he had been burned all over his body as he had charred and blistered skin. When the creature opened its mouth, it revealed its long, lizard-like tongue that descended to its chest. In his right hand, he had a cane he was using to keep himself from falling over, but the cane was covered in barbed wire. In his other hand, Velgrod was holding the Bible that was on the nightstand. When he held the Bible up into the air, it was immediately engulfed in flames that left nothing but ash. Velgrod kept eye contact the entire time as he used his foot to spread the ashes across the floor in a certain pattern, at the same time hissing menacingly. Velgrod then turned and began to walk away towards the door and down the stairs. Wheezy Donkey sat frozen with fear for a while before working up the courage to inspect the ash on the floor. When he finally did, he saw that the ash spelled out, "Hell is below you." Ooh, that was creepy.
Starting us off with number 10 is The Hand. This one's from Stephen Wagner, who said his dad told him the story. So back in 1942 in Juarez, Mexico, his dad was around 20 years old and he went to a circus that was visiting town. His younger brother came along and they didn't really go to see the acts, they were more interested in the freak shows. Disappointed after seeing the performers, they were about to leave with two girls when they ran into a short, stubby man. The stranger introduced himself as the greatest illusionist in the world. That's quite a hefty title. When asked if he was part of the circus, the man said the owner turned him down because his act was so frightening. The owner said he was Satan himself. Once he had their attention, he invited them back to his trailer in order to show them the act. Once inside, the stranger put a glove on his right hand, started running his left hand over his right while wiggling his fingers. He then started chanting bizarre words, and when he took the glove off, everyone's jaws just dropped. The stranger's hand was completely skeletal. He turned it, let them see the back, it was completely real. His brother went to take a closer look and the man grabbed his head and said he was really about to show them something now, and at this point everybody shat themselves and made a run for it. The stranger came out onto his porch laughing, and on the floor nearby was a bed of long nails pointing up which he jumped onto. Weird flex, but okay. Blood started coming out of his feet, but he was still just laughing it off, and from that day onwards, Stephen's father and brother knew they had met Satan. Coming in at number 9 is Father Urban Grandi. Now Father Urban was a Roman Catholic priest that lived in the Lodin part of France. He was under major scrutiny and received a lot of criticism for ignoring his celibacy vow. If anything, he was known for having sexual relations with many women and as someone who had an elevated sense of lustful depravity. By 1632, he was accused of sending the demon Asmodai to enchant a group of Ursuline nuns into committing evil acts and becoming his sex slaves, you know, as priests do. After numerous nuns made accusations of seduction against him, he was arrested, then acquitted, and then re-arrested. During his second arrest, he was tortured by judges, after which they revealed a contract they found in his bedroom, which indicated he had signed a deal with Satan and many other demons. They saw it as evidence of him making a diabolical pact and convicted him of witchcraft and sentenced him to death. He was burnt at the stake. At number 8, we have A Better Life. This one's from Redditor Kodas_Gaming, who said he had a really rough upbringing. His father abandoned his family and his mother was a heroin addict. He used to see her getting beat to a pulp, after which she'd take her frustrations out on him. CPS ended up taking him and his brother away, but a few years later his mum was clean and back with their dad and they regained custody. Sort of happy ending, kind of, but not really. They lived in a small house in central Texas, and according to the user, the house had a terrifying aura. Anytime he was home, he felt like like he was being watched, especially in the bathroom, and he would have regular nightmares. And at this point in his life, his mum was working herself to death because their dad was a lazy slob who did nothing. She got so depressed she tried to take her own life, and desperate to help, the user started praying to God every single day. But nothing changed. He realized for something to change, perhaps he could call on the demonic entity that engulfed his house rather than God. He researched satanic rituals for ages and finally found the one he needed. While his family were out for ice cream one day, he got on his knees, wax coming down the candles he'd lit, and cut his hand and started drawing symbols on the ground in his blood. Obviously while crying the whole time, because who wouldn't cry after doing that? He recited the words and made the deal. And right after he did that, a cold breeze swept through the house and everything went black. But he was pretty much unfazed because he expected something like that to happen, so he went to bed that night and had the worst nightmare ever. He saw himself in the reflection of the mirror in the bathroom with corpse grey skin, bloody tears, and his eyes were crimson as well. There was a noose around his neck and his hair was bloody. During the dream he thought, this can't be me, and then the reflection started laughing, saying, "It is now, you made the deal." He woke up in the bathtub covered in scratches and scars, and it just kept happening and getting worse. 1 month later he started seeing things, hearing things, his nail beds began to recede and bleed, his canines became sharper, and his tongue used to get cut out of nowhere, and he started full on hallucinating and having visions of the past, of native people being slaughtered. And how did that even happen? I don't even know. And what did he get out of all of this? Other than his mum getting a higher paying job, not much at all. So moral of the story, know what you're getting into before you ask the devil for help. Filling our number 7 slot is Joseph Smith. Now Joseph was a Mormon prophet in the early 1800s who claimed he encountered Satan before he saw Christ for the first time. We have both big shots in one story, how about that? The story goes that despite never doing this before, one day he just decided he was going to pray to God out loud. He went into the woods on a sunny day and knelt down and began to pray. I don't know why he went into the woods, he could have just done it in his house, but okay. But as soon as he did, he said he felt he was seized by a power that engulfed him entirely. He said it was so powerful he tried to speak but felt like his tongue was bound. A thick darkness surrounded him and he thought for sure he was going to die. And I mean, fair enough for being realistic. If I felt that, I'd probably think I was gonna die too. He was ready to sink into this despair that was around him, but in one final hope he used all his strength to call on God to get him out of Satan's hold. Then all of a sudden he saw a huge pillar of light over his head which came down on him. As the light rested on him, he saw 2 personages in the air above him and everything was fine again. At least this one had a happy ending, sort of. Now at number 6 is Madame Lalaurie. Delphine Lalaurie has been mentioned many times on this channel, but just a quick recap for you. She was a big Creole socialite in New Orleans. To the public, that is. Inside her house, she tortured and killed the majority of her slaves in a way you can't even imagine. In 1834, a house fire took over her mansion, and that's when she got exposed because authorities found bodies upon bodies of bound or mutilated slaves. One's stomach had been cut open and his intestines were wrapped around his neck. A bucket was also found with various organs from various slaves. A bucket. That's how much mass killing the woman was doing, that she needed a bucket for all the organs she was harvesting. Anyway, with some stroke of luck, she managed to escape New Orleans and go to France, but many believe she didn't just escape due to luck. She invented a religion involving voodoo and black magic, and on top of that, people vehemently believe she made a pact with the devil in order to be able to still be wealthy, still be free, and escape whilst committing these horrendous acts. I mean, for me, it was either the devil pact or she paid a lot of important money to let her go. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 5 is the Satanic Cult. This one's from Brad, who said back in 2005, him and his friends spent one summer TPing a lot of houses. In the town they grew up, there were always rumors of a satanic cult that operated around a 10-minute drive away. So one day they decided to go check it out and TP it. Ballsy move, I have to say. The 5 friends went there the day before moon, which I guess is a part of every scary story you hear nowadays, and they bypassed the fence and ended up in a garden enclosure and heard an eerie high-pitched sound. Ignoring it, they continued to explore, found an old-locked church, and found nothing else and decided to leave. Bit anticlimactic, but just stay with me. When they got to their car, their key, which was working perfectly 10 minutes prior, just stopped working. The car alarm started going off and then it magically just unlocked by itself. They piled in and drove off, and mid-drive the lights in the car just went off. The driver didn't press anything to cause it, it just happened. Panicked, they rushed home, and when Brad got to his front porch, he found 3 identical black cats. Keep in mind he lives a good 25 miles away from the cult, so how did these cats even get to his house? He took the cats as a bad omen and decided to take the cats a few miles out of town and leave them there, and the whole drive he was being followed by 2 black cars despite taking small dirt roads. Now I don't know if people were just messing with him here or the satanic cult was there and they saw him and everything was their doing, but either way, it's scary and it's creepy. At number 4 is Giuseppe Tartini. Now from the name, doesn't he just sound like a brilliant Italian musician of some kind? His name just has the ring to it, you know? Anyway, Tartini was an Italian composer and violinist during the Baroque period. He was very influential in Italy, but he was also known for his huge inferiority complex and uncontrollable temper. And I can just see that equaling to a lot of smashed violins. But anyway, the story goes that one day Tartini heard Francesco Verrocchini playing the violin better than him, and he was fuming and also dissatisfied with his own skills. The event made him spiral into depression for months, and in that time he worked in solitude and practiced the violin for 12 hours a day. During this period, it's said he had a dream in which the devil appeared and he met him. He appeared at the foot of his bed and played a sonata on the violin like he invented the damn activity. He offered him success in all his musical dreams in exchange for his soul. Did he accept? Well, it was never really confirmed, but when he woke up the next day, he wrote down as much of the sonata as he could, but no matter how many times he played it, it just wasn't as good as the Devil's version. If you want to check it out, the sonata in question is called the Devil's Trill Sonata, his most well-known piece, and it's quite hard to play even by today's standards. But the fact he could never play it as well as the Devil, I mean, doesn't that just indicate he wasn't successful in everything he wanted to be? So am I the only one identifying this major plot hole we have going on? Did he accept? Did he not? Let me know, Tartini. Filling our number 3 slot is Gemma Galgani. Gemma was an Italian mystic, later saint, in Italy during the late 19th century. She believed that the devil was waging a personal war against her. She said he loved giving her horrible headaches to the point she couldn't even pray. I mean, honestly, I just feel like that was a bad migraine, but moving on. She went on to say that once she was writing at her desk alone and the devil came and dragged her from the table by her hair with such force that her hair came out in clumps. In another attack, the devil took the form of a big black dog and put his paws on her shoulders, making her whole body ache all over. And in another one, she was drinking holy water and he twisted her arms so backwards that she fell to the ground in pain. If that's not bad enough, she said he even took on the form of people she trusted or knew, and once he even took the form of an angel. The worst incident though was when he started giving her blows to the head. She ran to her room but found him there with a rope. He kept trying to get her to give in to the wickedness and she kept resisting, and so he kept striking her with the rope as she was on the ground. He then threw her on the bed, then dragged her from it and violently smashed her head against the ground, and she passed out. Just imagine all this happening in your room and no one's there to help you. I'd be terrified. But I'm also curious as to what form the devil took when he attacked her all those times, and if anybody was around, were they seeing this happen? Was she being attacked by an invisible force? Like, what was happening here? Now at number 2 is Steve. This one's from Redditor's Shabby Boa, whose real name is Steve and who used to be a trucker for 30 years. One night after a drop-off, he was on his way back home when he stopped at a diner to pee. It was completely empty, no customers, no staff, absolutely no one. He quickly peed, and when he came out, a grey-haired man was sitting at the bar. He told Steve he owned the diner and gave him food and a drink. When he got up to leave, the man said food is not what you truly desired tonight. Waited out, Steve left and got into his truck. About an hour and a half later, he had to pee pee again, Steve, you've got a small bladder, mate, and saw another small diner which he stopped at. He went inside and again it was completely empty save a grey-haired man at the bar. It was the same man who said nice to have you back, Steve, as soon as he walked in. Steve got pissed at this point thinking he was being screwed over by this guy and demanded to know what the guy wanted. He said he was trying to help Steve. He started asking about Steve and how he used to have a family. Steve told him his wife and daughter died in a house fire years ago caused by faulty wiring. But the man questioned him saying it wasn't just faulty wiring. The faulty wiring was a happy coincidence that just so happened to have happened the same time Steve left a lit cigarette in the house. Steve fought with him more and in the end the man offered him a deal. He said he could bring back his wife and daughter in exchange for his soul after he died. Thinking it was complete bullshit, he agreed and left the diner. Before he did, he asked the man who he was, to which he responded, I am the devil. That night he got home as if he never stopped anywhere at all, and when he entered the house, he heard his wife say, Steve, is that you? And the small footsteps of his daughter. He was so excited, but when they came down the stairs, their skin was charred black. Chunks of it were falling off, their clothes had fused and melted with their skin, and Steve could barely hold in his puke. And at that point he'd realized he'd made the biggest mistake ever and that the next 30 years were literally gonna be hell. And finally, at number 1 is The Man. This one's from VR Greg, who said she met the devil for the first time when she was 8 years old. She was walking through a forest on her way home from school when she encountered a black-haired man in a shabby suit. Except one foot of his was a goat hoof and the other was a rooster claw. She could see them when she looked at him directly, but peripherally they looked completely normal. She took him for a walk and then he left. By the time she was a teenager, she assumed the counter was maybe a dream or maybe that she just imagined the whole thing. But one day she was watching a news story about a man who got away with killing his wife, and as they showed the judge announcing the not guilty verdict, the murderer turned around and smiled at a man behind him who wasn't his lawyer. She recognized him right away. Black hair, shabby suit, hadn't aged a day. Her parents threw her a surprise 16th birthday to which nobody came to, which is just really sad. I'm sorry that happened to you. She ran home crying and she knew no one came because her classmate Erin had her party the same day just to spite her. That night she slept thinking about all the horrible ways Erin deserved to be punished, and the next day at the breakfast table her dad looked shaken. He told her that Erin had been found dead in the park. She met the devil the same day in her room and he told her she had wanted it to happen and he executed it for her. He offered her a deal, but thankfully the one piece of common sense that 90% of people possess is knowing that you should never make a deal with the devil, so she didn't. The girl didn't see him again until the funeral of her mother, where he told her the doctors lied to her about her mother dying peacefully, that it was agony and that no one was around to help her. She started immediately screaming and her dad ran over to her and made her sit down. When she asked him where the black-haired man was, he said, "You were standing alone, honey," and just started screaming out of nowhere. Shivers. That gave me shivers.
Number 10. Richard Cabell. This man lived in Devon, England during the 1600s and was apparently a huge dirtbag. He would torment people in his town and even abuse his wife. One night, in a violent rage, he struck his wife and she tried to escape. He then hunted her down and killed her and her dog. We all know what happens next. People believe that he felt he had the freedom to treat everyone horribly because he made a deal with the devil for immortality. But he did eventually die on July 5th, 1677. After he died, there were reports of a ghostly figure walking around the gravesite. This freaked out the locals so much, so they put a giant slab of stone on top of his grave, as well as encased the tomb with metal bars. And it was said that at night you could see a ghostly figure that kind of looked like a beast with glowing red eyes. Some people thought that it was Satan looking for the soul that belonged to him. Number 9. The Carpenter. The devil's weaved into history in so many different places. This ancient tale comes from a village called Tyrol in Austria. The legend has it that the locals had a well-traveled bridge that they used to cross from their village to a village called Schruns. One day, the bridge was destroyed in a massive flood. The villagers were very distressed, so they got help from a local carpenter. They told him that if he could rebuild the bridge in 3 days, they would pay him a huge amount of money. He knew such a task would be impossible, so he asked the villagers if he could have a day to think about it in order to come up with a solution. That night, when he was trying to find a way to build the bridge in such a short period of time, he was visited by a man with a little green hat. I love how these stories just have some creepy dude that shows up to your house in the middle of the night, and you're like, I wonder what he wants. It couldn't be anything bad. Well, the little man told the carpenter that he would build the bridge for him, and he could keep all the money. The only thing he wanted in return was the soul from the first person to leave this house and cross the bridge. The carpenter knew this was the devil, so he had a plan. The next day, the bridge was built, and the carpenter showed up. The devil saw him there and was jumping in excitement to get his prize. Then, the carpenter pushed a goat onto the bridge and said, "Here's your soul. You got played, dude." Legend says the devil took the goat and people started roasting him as he was walking around with the goat. People were like, "Hey, you should have read the fine print. Oh, you two look like a great couple." I just love the idea of people roasting the devil. Like, oh, Prince of Darkness can't trick a tradesman. Number 8. George Lukens. Back in the day, if you got sick, you kind of had two options. You either got sicker and died, or you could go to a church and get an exorcism. On May 31st, 1788, George Lukens wasn't feeling too hot. He had started having convulsions, and it was reported that he would yell out in a voice that didn't sound human. So he went to the doctor, but after trying almost everything, the doctors couldn't cure him of whatever his ailment was. So he had plan B. He went to see Reverend Easterbrook to get his soul washed. The Reverend tried to help George, but it seemed that what was tormenting him was too strong for just him. So he brought in 6 other priests to perform a super exorcism. The 7 of them took their combined power to cleanse George. During the process, he changed through 7 different demonic personalities, one of which claimed to be the devil. After the super exorcism, George was cured. And probably didn't live past 35 because that's how life went back then. Number 7. The Codex Gigas. Would you read a book that might have been written by the devil? I think that one's a hard pass for me. I'll stick to reading the back of cereal boxes. Well, the Codex Gigas is said to have the devil's actual handwriting, and whoever reads it becomes cursed. Why would you read that? I don't know if I believe that the devil's handwriting is in the book, but I wouldn't want to be wrong just for some light reading. The story goes that back in 1523, Ludovico Spoletano wanted to make the best spaghetti ever, so he summoned the devil. Nah, I'm just kidding. He wanted to answer a series of questions he'd been asked. Exam season is very tough. It's documented that the devil possessed him, grabbed a pen, and started writing. Most of the text has never been decoded except for one sentence that says, "I think it smells like updog." Number 6. Through the Window. This one was written by Redditor Gayreka. It's a story his father told him about when his dad was growing up. He said that when his dad and uncle were younger, his uncle was a bit of a rebellious kid. Never listened, would stay up late, draw dicks on everything. His father told him that it was a big problem, that his uncle was constantly challenging authority and would get in fights with his parents all the time. Well, one night, the whole family heard a blood-curdling scream come from his uncle's room. The family rushed in there and his uncle was freaking out. He said there was a man standing outside his window. Their father went to check for someone but couldn't find anything. His uncle describes the man as wearing a long trench coat and having no face except for glowing red eyes. After this, his uncle was as sweet as pie, became a respectful member of society. So was this a devil encounter? Or was this a story a father told his son so he wouldn't act up? That's healthy parenting. Scare him psychologically, but he'll be a good kid. Number 5. Michael Scott.
No, God!
Not the hilarious character from The Office. Michael Scott was a Scottish mathematician born in 1175 and is considered one of the most brilliant men to come out of Scotland. He traveled through Europe and eventually ended up in Italy. While in Italy, his brilliance didn't go unnoticed. He gained the attention of Emperor Frederick II. Frederick brought Michael into his court as the head astrologer. But when you're a super smart guy back then, people get a little suspicious. It's said he could summon demons to do his bidding, and they would go all over the world to bring him delicacies. And that's just where his power started. There's myths of him defeating a coven of witches that he turned into stone. It's even said he changed the course of the river Steeds. But the most famous one is him summoning the devil to build a road to his castle. His father had just built a shiny new castle and it needed a road. I mean, you don't want to be the only castle in the neighborhood without a road. Like, what do people think? So he called the devil and many demons to build a road for him. He could have just hired contractors. He owed the devil his soul and foresaw that the devil would kill him by dropping a rock on his head. So he always wore a metal cap.
Clever girl.
But one day, he took off his metal cap when entering a church, and a rock fell on his head and killed him. They get you when you least expect. Number 4. John Dee. John Dee was born in 1527 on July 13th. He was an Elizabethan mathematician and astrologer, but he also liked to dabble in the occult. He was into some pretty freaky stuff. Even though he was researching black magic behind closed doors, he managed to work his way up as a man of intellect, becoming the royal astrologer for Queen Mary. However, his little secrets caught up with him, and he was arrested for heresy in 1555. How do you get caught for something back then? The only way you would find out would be if you told people. Like, how was your weekend? Pretty good, you know, sacrificed a goat to the Dark Lord. Anyways, when he got out, he kept digging into the occult. In 1582, he claimed to contact the spirit world. People weren't a fan of this, so he had to move up north to the Manchester Collegiate Church. You can go visit his office to this day. There's the desk that he worked at with a giant burn mark in it. It's said that it's the devil's footprint. I would be pissed. I work all this time to summon the devil. He shows up and he puts his feet on my furniture. Number 3, Robert Johnson. Become one of the greatest musicians who ever lived, and people are going to start rumors about you. Robert Johnson is one of the most talented and influential blues musicians who has ever walked the earth. And a big myth about him is that he sold his soul to the devil to become as great as he did. As the story goes, he was walking down a highway and came across a man that offered him the ability to play the blues like no one has ever done before, but would cost him his soul. Robert was like, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, what is a soul really? It's like a concept or like whatever. Well, Robert went down in history for his amazing skills and died suspiciously at 27. Number 2, Niccolo Paganini. Said to be the greatest violinist who ever lived. Seemed to be a common theme that back in the day, if you were great at something, they probably thought you sold your soul to the devil. No, it can be that you have like a natural gift and you work super hard, you just made a deal. Well, the same speculation goes for Niccolo. He was an Italian violinist like none other. He was so gifted that he would surpass anyone who ever taught him. He was touring at 15 and probably got hit on a lot. Part of why people probably thought that he had sold his soul to the devil was that he looked so ghoulish. He was tall, skinny, had pale skin, long black hair. He was kind of like a hot Edward Scissorhands. People would even say that they could see the devil hold his violin while he played. I think they were just jealous. Number 1, George Whitefield. Now this one is my favorite for sure. George was a traveling evangelist. He wandered around trying to get people hyped on God. I mean, we've all seen these guys.
Do it, Jesus! A brand new hit. Bam, 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 bam.
In 1740, George was in Ipswich, Massachusetts. He was putting on a banger show. Like, people were going nuts. Apparently, the sermon was so hot and he was bashing the devil so hard that the devil showed up and was like, "You talking?" And George was like, "Yeah, I'm talking." And then he fought the devil. This is like an episode of Maury. George then summoned the holy power to push the devil out, and after that, the devil fell off a cliff and landed on one foot. He's got like a +10 on acrobatics. It's said that the devil's footprint is there to this day. The devil is probably at home like, "Dude, I don't even know you. Why are you talking so much smack?" At number 10, we have a close call. Now, this video will probably scare the hell out of some people, but I think of this as just the perfect representation of how close you can get to sharks without having them tear you to pieces. Now, that is a little freaky. That's a hammerhead shark, and you can see it sweeps in very close, and it looks like it's gonna take a chunk out of our diver, but then he's okay. Coming in at number 9, we have Julie Wolfe. When you think of a canoe trip, you think about peace and calm waters. Every time I get into a canoe, I think I'm in a rom-com and I'm randomly gonna run into Jennifer Aniston and then we're gonna fall in love next to a campfire. Well, Julie Wolfe didn't have that experience at all. Julie was riding her canoe off the coast of California when she got rocked by something strange. It felt as if she had bumped into a rock, but she was way out in the ocean, so there was no way she could have run into land. Turns out it was a great white shark. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a great time to me. Well, it got even worse when the shark bit into her canoe. This tore a hole into it, but Julie still had some time. She started to paddle back to shore and was able to get back to land before the whole thing sunk into the ocean. On the shark's side, he probably thought he was getting a nice snack, and then he just got a mouthful of carbon fiber. That's like when you put some Kraft cheese on your burger but you forget to take the plastic off. Coming in at number 8, we have Dan Shoesmith. A diving instructor was leading a shark dive and everything seemed to be going as planned. He took his group down to the bottom of the ocean, they kneeled in the sand, and the shark started to swim around them. The time underwater was finishing up and they started to ascend to the surface. Now, normally the sharks would swim away at this point, but they started to follow the group to the surface. Not only that, but it seemed that they were getting closer. Dan got his group of divers to huddle together and stick their fins out to create some distance in case the sharks got close. He then filled a safety buoy full of air and sent it to the surface so the boats would know that he was approaching the surface. When he did this, one of the sharks chased the buoy to the surface. The group of divers waited about 10 meters below the surface for what would have felt like an eternity, but eventually the sharks left and they were able to safely exit the water. Coming in at number 7, we have the Jaws encounter. I had to put a movie one on this list, especially this movie. Think about what your chances of running into a shark are, how much time you spend around water. I know some people who are even afraid of swimming in pools because they think something is going to try and eat them, and this is largely part of this movie. Jaws gave generation after generation an irrational fear of sharks. And yes, it's an irrational fear because you'll see someone who's afraid of sharks wolf down a bunch of high fructose corn syrup like diabetes isn't licking its lips. Steven Spielberg has even said if he could go back in time, he wouldn't make Jaws because it demonized sharks in such a way. But the opening scene of this movie where a girl is getting munched down to that famous Donna is still one of the most iconic movie moments ever. It just sucks that so many people became afraid of something that they will probably never see in real life. Coming in at number 6, we have the Australian kayakers. A couple of mates off the coast of Australia were going for a nice kayak ride when they got an unexpected visitor. These guys didn't get a bump like Julie Wolfe, but almost like it was pulled right out of a movie, they saw a fin behind them trailing them, waiting to see if one of them was foolish enough to tip over their kayak. The two men were a little frightened, but they just decided they would wait it out. One of the men later described the encounter as a dog coming to check out what was going on. They didn't have a lot of options to scare off their curious friend, so they went with slapping the water with their paddles. Turns out that worked perfectly. Coming in at number 5, we have Cops vs. Sharks. No, this isn't the title of the new motion picture that's going to be coming out this fall. It's actually an incident that happened in Australia. It should be no surprise that Australia has back-to-back slots on a list about shark encounters. Well, a couple of police were responding to something that had them out on a little dinghy. I don't know what kind of water crime that could be, but they were out on a very small boat and a 16-foot great white shark swam by the boat. I don't think there's anything in the police training manual about that. Coming in at number 4, we have when Sam Jackson got eaten by a shark. Okay, just one more movie one on the list. This one is my favorite Sam Jackson movie moment ever. Sam Jackson is trying to rally the troops in the movie Deep Blue Sea. It's a moment of motivation. It seems like everything is about to turn around. But here's the thing about Deep Blue Sea. It's more of a horror movie than an action movie. And when things seem like they're starting to get good in a horror movie, you know they're about to get so much worse. That clip is so funny. A bunch of them got wetsuits on and everyone is glistening with sweat for some reason. I love every second of it. Cheesy deaths in movies are some of my favorite things. Alright, let's move back to real people getting eaten by sharks. Coming in at number 3, we have bathroom break. You know, if you're tucked away in a cage, the shark will find some way to get to you. A group of divers were down in a cage taking some photos of a massive shark swimming by when this underwater king hit them with one of these. I don't think you can smell it because you're underwater, but that poop is going to cover every inch of you. You're gonna have poop under your fingernails, poop in your eyebrows. You are gonna become one with the poop. Coming in at number 2, we have Scarier Than It Looks. There wasn't a lot that people watching could do in our next clip. They're just standing around watching in horror. Yeah, it looks like that shark is gonna flip over that little kayak and eat that dude like he's downing a Glizzy Gladiator hot dog. But here's the thing, that's a basking shark. They only eat plankton. They don't even have teeth. So even though that looks like it would be terrifying to be in the water with, it's really just a big vegan swimming out there. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have The Cage Won't Protect You. The thing about shark diving is you want to ensure you're going to see a shark, so sometimes you bring bait, and the bait can get the sharks a little bit excited. A lot of people will go into a cage to try and avoid contact with the shark. But here's the thing about sharks. They are basically a spine, a jaw, and then all muscle and cartilage, so sometimes they can squeeze into very small spaces and you can have something like this happen.
He's in the cage. Oh my god.
Here's something interesting about that clip. There was a diver in the cage with the shark. The shark is thrashing all over the place. You have blood in the water. Eventually the shark works its way out of the cage, and then the diver returns to the surface and signals that he is okay, and walks away without a scratch, and the most amazing story to tell at a party.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have exoplanets. One of the first things spoken about in the 12-minute long anonymous video is that around 25 years ago, we didn't know that planets existed outside of our solar system. While that seems hard to believe, that is actually basically true, keeping in mind that this video was released in 2017. The first exoplanets, which are what planets outside of our solar system are called, were discovered in 1992, which is super recently. The video then goes on to explain that today we have found over 3,400 exoplanets that orbit other suns. This may seem redundant or unimportant, but this is a really important part of our search for alien life. With the vastness of space, there are so many places that need to be searched, so we have to find some place to start, and these planets are the perfect place. It is entirely possible that alien life may thrive off of entirely different things than life as we know it. The things we need to survive might be detrimental to alien life, but how are we supposed to know that when we don't know any aliens? This is why we started our search by looking for places with conditions similar to Earth, which we now call habitable planets. Part of a habitable planet's requirements is that they are orbiting a star, but that they aren't too close or too far from it like we are with the sun. So what the video is trying to get across is that while 25 years ago we didn't know any, we now know of thousands of planets that might be holding some kind of alien life. While we haven't found the proof yet, we at least have a pretty stellar starting point. In our number 9 spot today, we have Dr. Brian O'Leary. One thing Anonymous mentioned in the video was an apparent quote from Dr. Brian O'Leary, who's a former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor. The video stated that he said that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been monitoring us for a very long time, and that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view, and that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use droids, they use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems, which seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. I obviously have no idea how I could possibly substantiate these claims, but they certainly are interesting regardless of what you personally believe. This could of course just be nonsense in order to stir up the masses, but it could also be someone who's finally telling us the truth, but we're all just too skeptical at this point to believe it. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of what Dr. O'Leary said. Do you think it's a hunk of baloney, or do you think that he just might be telling the truth? In our number 8 spot today, we have the FBI documents. Around the halfway mark, the person in the anonymous video begins to discuss some sort of FBI documents that are apparently unclassified, just sitting there on the website. The video claims that the documents suggest that we've not only been visited by aliens from space, but also beings from other dimensions. The video does explain that the document didn't originate from within the FBI, but rather from a university department head, but that the FBI treated the document with the utmost importance, which is certainly interesting. It's also very important to note, however, that this document was sent in 1947. I'm not sure if that makes the claims more or less likely or credible, but the timing of it definitely seems important, at least to me. While this is one of those things that you have to draw your own conclusions from, in the video it is mentioned that while we are arguing whether or not supposed UFO or alien sightings have really taken place here on Earth or in space, there are real instances of extraterrestrial beings visiting us, but we're just too focused on the debate to open our eyes and see for ourselves. In our number 7 spot today, we have esoteric matters. After the discussion of the FBI documents, there is a claim that these beings that have apparently been visiting us are coming not from a planet as we think of it, but rather some sort of etheric planet that interpenetrates with our own, but that we are unable to perceive. Apparently, if you're a student of esoteric matters, these concepts will make a lot more sense to you, or so this anonymous video claims. Apparently, these alien beings are able to make a conscious decision to enter our plane, and in that same respect, they're also to make a decision to disappear from our view. Apparently, they're visiting us as they are thinking about settling settling here on our plane and that they are coming here peacefully. During these visits, they are also said to have technology that would destroy any sort of attack made on them, so it is advised that if they do make themselves visible to us, we do not attack or make them feel threatened. I'm not so sure about this one, but at the end of the day, I am certainly no student of esoteric matters, so maybe it's just something that my brain cannot comprehend with the knowledge I currently have. In our number 6 spot today, we have this UFO footage. This UFO footage is coming from another anonymous video which claims that real UFO footage is always censored and that this video has been previously censored, but they were here to expose the truth. It is unclear where this UFO video was taken, and at the end of the day, I'm no expert in debunking these things, so it's tough to say whether or not it's real, but let's all just take a look and you can judge for yourselves. I know that wasn't the most exciting video, but what do we think aliens are going to be doing if they really are visiting us? What do you guys think? Do you guys think that this video is really showing some sort of UFO? And if you do you think it's aliens or just some sort of secret project that we aren't privy to? In our number 5 spot today, we have Perseverance. A point that was made in the video is something that we are actually now watching happen in real time, and that is the mission to Mars for the Perseverance rover that is currently there digging around in the soil. The video stated that Mars may hold signs of an ancient environment that may have been favorable to microbial life. Well, that is exactly true, and the reason the rover is there at all. The Perseverance rover launched from Earth on July 30th, 2020 and made an incredible and successful landing on Mars on February 18th, 2021. While the rover has provided us with some incredible high-definition photos of the red planet, which truly are incredible to look at, its main objective is to dig around and search for ancient signs of life, collecting rock and soil samples for a possible return to Earth for further research. While Mars' thin atmosphere is unable to shield the planet from the high amounts of radiation coming from space now, it is thought that the atmosphere did once act as a better shield, and that the environment of Mars may have once been a great host for life, which is exactly why this mission is so important. While when the anonymous video was first released, we were still a ways away from the Perseverance mission taking place, it's really cool to see how it has come to fruition, and it's exciting to see the new photos and discoveries that are made each day. In our number 4 spot today, we have UFO footage Part 2. We have to include just one more video of what is claimed to be proof of aliens visiting us on Earth before we get back into the more science-y top 3 points. This is another video that was uploaded by a member of Anonymous, and it comes from 2017. The video features a dark sky, but it shows what looks like some sort of aircraft with a few flashing lights, and it seems like it is able to basically just hover there. Not long after the video starts, another mysterious UFO seemingly joins the first one, and the two are just seen floating there. What do you guys think these could be? I obviously don't know what an alien aircraft would look like, so it's tough to say if this is a realistic example or not. All I know is that if this isn't someone playing a trick and they really saw this in the sky, I have no other possible explanations of what it could be. In our number 3 spot today, we have TRAPPIST-1. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. One of the things Anonymous mentioned in the video was a nearby star called TRAPPIST-1. The video didn't go into too much detail about this, but I'm here to do that now so we can all know what they were talking about. While TRAPPIST-1 is a star, the revelation that the video spoke about was that this star has an entire solar system of Earth-like planets. This discovery first came in 2017, and upon further research, in 2018 it was revealed that some of the planets just may harbor even more water than Earth does. Some of the planets are a little too close to the star, so the water is more atmospheric water vapor. The ones in the middle have liquid water, like us, and the furthest ones have ice. TRAPPIST-1 is now the most thoroughly known planetary system apart from ours, which is kinda cool. While the Anonymous video made it seem like there was a full-blown advanced alien civilization living in this solar system, there still might be potential for some form of microbial life that we just haven't quite found yet. And that is very cool. In our number 2 spot today we have Enceladus. If you had heard of Enceladus before the anonymous video, there's a good chance you knew it as basically an icy snowball floating around in space, or perhaps you simply knew it as a small moon of Saturn with a diameter of 502 kilometers, but as it turns out, this small moon might hold some pretty amazing potential. It was discovered that this moon has hydrothermal processes going on underneath its crust. To us non-scientists that means next to nothing, but what if I said that means that it just might have all of the requirements for life, and that it is becoming a greater possibility that we might find microbial life there. Basically, this moon has an icy shell for a surface and then a rocky interior, but between those two layers is a warm ocean, and this ocean is where scientists think the life is most likely to be. This discovery came almost accidentally when the Cassini orbiter arrived to Saturn in 2005, and it found water plumes shooting out of the cracks in the surface of the moon, which made scientists realize that it just may be geologically active. Through more research and by flying the orbiter through the water, by the time 2015 rolled around, scientists knew that it was holding all of the keys to life. While this little moon was never the original focus of research, it quickly took over with its incredibly exciting potential. In our number 1 spot today we have Europa. We've got another moon to talk about that was mentioned in the video that also just might be holding the keys to us finding alien life, but this time we're taking it over to Jupiter and its icy moon Europa. Europa has been a point of interest for a while after NASA's Galileo Jupiter probe in the 1990s revealed an unusually warm spot in Europa's cold surface. In March of 2014, the Hubble telescope detected what scientists thought might be a plume of water vapor, but the caution turned to cautious excitement and optimism in February of 2016 when the telescope caught another, much larger plume in the same spot. This has led to the creation of the Europa Clipper mission. While this mission doesn't yet have a set date, it will see an orbiter flying to Europa to fly through these plumes in an attempt to see what they are made out of, similar to the one we just talked about, to see if it really is holding the key to life, or maybe even life itself. One of the scientists on the Clipper mission, Robert Pappalardo, explained that if there is life on Europa, it almost certainly was completely independent from the origin of life on Earth. That would mean the origin of life must be pretty easy throughout the galaxy and beyond.